Grimora.
Snow drifted across the interstate in long, slow bands, crossing the lanes like pale ribbons drawn by an unseen hand. The plows had already passed through, but the storm returned with a steady rhythm that erased the cleared lines and covered the road again. Headlights from the few remaining cars at that hour moved like distant markers through the white. Caleb Morgan kept his hands steady on the wheel of the sedan as he traveled along the outer lane of the highway. It was Christmas Eve, and the towns along this stretch of road had already closed their gas stations and diners for the night. The digital clock on the dashboard showed 11:27. The radio shifted between static and fragments of distant stations carried through the hills. He had been driving for hours, moving from one state line to the next to reach his sister's house by morning. The route cut through a long rural section where exits were spread far apart. Snow gathered along the shoulders, but the main lane remained passable. His breath made a faint cloud when he exhaled, the heater struggling against the cold that pushed through the door seals. A green highway sign appeared through the snow ahead. The reflective letters indicated the distance to the next exit with a single number, 10 miles. Underneath, another smaller sign showed the symbol for a rest area. Caleb noted it and decided he would pull off there to check the map and the fuel level before the next stretch. The storm thickened. Visibility narrowed to a tunnel of light 5 or 6 car lengths ahead. Beyond that, everything dissolved into gray. The center lines came and went under the snow. The world outside the glass compressed into the sound of the engine and the whisper of tires. As he passed under an overpass, the sound changed slightly. Concrete reflected the noise back at him, and for a moment it felt like driving through a hollow space. When he emerged on the other side, the road seemed emptier. No headlights followed in the rearview mirror. No taillights appeared ahead. He drove for several minutes in complete isolation. Then he saw something on the highway shoulder. At first it looked like a darker strip in the snow. As he approached, the shape resolved into a line of footprints crossing from the median toward the outer edge of the road. They were sharp and fresh, not filled in by snow. The prints cut across both lanes at a slight angle, as if someone had walked from one side of the highway to the other with careful steps. Caleb slowed the car and scanned the area. He saw no stopped vehicles on the shoulder. No hazard lights flashed in the distance. No figure walked near the guardrail or stood by the trees beyond the ditch. Only the footprints marked the scene. He drove past them, watching in the side mirror as the line receded into the darkness. The storm closed behind him, hiding the prints within seconds. A thin uneasiness settled in his chest, quiet but persistent. The nearest exit was still several miles away. The rest area sign had not yet appeared. A few minutes later, he saw another set. These footprints began at the right shoulder and crossed toward the median. They were spaced the same way as the first line, deep impressions in the fresh snow. The tracks did not wander or hesitate. They formed a straight path from one side of the road to the other. Again, no person accompanied them. The highway remained empty in both directions. Caleb checked his speed and kept the car steady in the center of the lane. The radio shifted into static and remained there as he moved along. He pressed the scan button, but no station locked in. The sound of white noise filled the cabin. The next set of footprints appeared closer. These began beyond the guardrail, near the dark shapes of the trees, and angled across the lanes toward the opposite side. As he drove toward them, he saw that the prints overlapped slightly with tire tracks left by another vehicle that must have passed sometime earlier. It was as if someone had walked through the path of the previous car long after it had gone. He passed them without slowing this time. The rest area sign emerged at last through the snow. It indicated a turnoff 1 mile ahead. The blue and white symbol for parking and facilities stood out clearly in the headlights. Caleb felt a measured relief and decided he would stop there, if only to stand outside the car for a moment and break the feeling that the moving tunnel of light had become the entire world. The off-ramp appeared on the right. He signaled and eased onto it. The ramp curved gently downward, following a line of dim reflectors half covered in ice. At the bottom, a wide parking area stretched out, divided by painted lines mostly hidden under the snow. A low building stood to the left with closed doors and dark windows. A single tall lamp near the center of the lot flickered with pale color, powered by a backup system. There were no other cars. Caleb parked near the edge facing the tree line, leaving the engine running. Snow fell in a steady curtain. The air beyond the glass looked dense, almost solid. He checked the fuel gauge. Slightly under half a tank, enough to continue. He exhaled slowly and opened the door. The cold hit him with full force. The sound of the engine became muted under the thick blanket of snow around the car. The parking surface held the thin layer that compressed under his boots with a soft sound. His breath rose in slow clouds. The storm made a constant whisper that blended with the nearby trees. He walked a few steps away from the car and stretched his legs. The rest area building showed no sign of activity. A small notice was taped to one of the windows, indicating limited winter service hours. The interior lights were off. Only the parking lot lamp gave any illumination, casting a circle of pale color onto the snow and leaving the outer edges of the lot in dim gray. As his eyes adjusted, he saw footprints again. They started at the far edge of the parking lot, beyond the light, near where the pavement dropped into the ditch. The prints were clear and deep, the same size and spacing as those on the highway. They moved toward the center of the lot, passing between two empty parking spaces, then crossed directly in front of his car. The line continued toward the sidewalk leading to the rest area building. Caleb followed them slowly with his gaze. The footprints moved across the walkway and stopped at the base of the short set of steps that led to the main doors. There they turned, as if the person had pivoted, and retraced a path back toward the parking lot. The second line ran parallel to the first for a few steps, then veered off toward the right side, angling toward the trees. He watched the tracks disappear into the darkness beyond the reach of the lamp. No figure stood there. No movement disturbed the tree line. The snow fell into the space where someone should have been. A feeling of being observed settled around him. It did not come from any specific direction. It felt like the entire scene had shifted its attention toward him. The air seemed to hold still for a few seconds, the normal motion of the storm slowing without stopping. He returned to the car, opened the door, and sat inside. The heater pushed warm air toward his hands. He locked the doors without thinking about the action. The radio still played static. The digital clock read 11:58, 2 minutes until midnight. He considered waiting until the hour passed, then pulling back onto the highway. Something about that idea felt both arbitrary and necessary. He left the engine running and watched the snow accumulate on the hood and windshield. The footprints changed. At first, he did not notice. His focus stayed on the clock display. When he glanced up, he saw that the nearest set of prints, the ones that had passed in front of the car, now appeared deeper than before. The edges looked sharper, as though someone had pressed into them again. A second set of impressions now overlapped the original ones in places, doubling some of the marks. The clock shifted to 11:59. Footsteps sounded, though the snow should have absorbed most of the impact. The sound came as a soft, steady rhythm, moving from the far side of the lot toward the car. Each step matched the distance between prints. Caleb could not see anyone in motion, but the air in front of the vehicle seemed to thicken, like heat haze without warmth. The steps stopped a few feet away, directly in front of the hood. The footprints there appeared slightly wider, filled with new snow, but pressed deeper into the layer. The engine idle changed pitch, as if compensating for a slight drop in temperature. Something stood there, invisible but present. The digital clock turned over to 12 o'clock. A sound carried faintly through the storm from far away. A town bell striking the hour.
Each tone arrived a moment after the last, softened by distance and snow. With the first bell, the footsteps resumed. They moved slowly around the car, crossing in front of the driver's side, then looping behind the trunk. The prints deepened wherever they passed, then trailed toward the exit lane that led back to the highway. Caleb sat motionless, watching the marks form one by one near the edge of his headlights. The figure that made them remained unseen, yet each step left a clear impression. When the bell finished its 12th strike, the footsteps stopped at the beginning of the on-ramp. The footprints pointed toward the highway. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the prints began to extend forward on their own along the ramp, as if the unseen traveler had started walking again, heading back to the interstate. The snow recorded the motion. The presence no longer felt directed at him. It seemed to have returned to a predetermined path. Caleb shifted the car into drive and eased forward, following the line of footprints at a distance. He left the rest area and merged back toward the highway. The prints continued along the edge of the ramp until it reached the main lanes, then crossed over them in the same angled pattern he had seen before. As he joined the highway, the footprints moved ahead of him across both lanes, then down the opposite shoulder, where they faded into darkness. Within moments, the storm covered them. The road became blank again. The radio found a station. A soft voice announced the late hour and played a slow piece of music. The static faded to the background. Caleb adjusted his grip on the wheel and kept his speed steady. The storm remained, but the sense of focused attention had lifted. Miles later, he reached a town where streetlights painted rows of color on the wet pavement. At a gas station that remained open, he stopped to refuel and stretch his legs. Inside the small store, an older attendant stood behind the counter with a newspaper folded beside him. He mentioned the storm in a calm tone and said many people avoided that stretch of highway on Christmas Eve. Years ago, the attendant said, a driver had left the rest area on a night like this and attempted to walk along the highway after his car died. Search teams found his tracks crossing back and forth over the lanes, but they never found his body. Since then, some drivers reported seeing footprints in the snow with no one walking them, always on the same night, always around the same hour. Caleb listened without comment. When he returned to his car, the highway looked clear under the town lights. He drove on through the rest of the night. The snow lessened as he approached the next state line. The memory of the footprints stayed with him, aligned with the rhythm of the engine and the white lines passing under his tires. Far behind him, the rest area lamp burned through the remaining hours of darkness. Snow covered most of the marks in the lot. Along the highway, new flakes smoothed the surface until no trace remained of anything that had crossed there. The pattern would return on another Christmas Eve when the hour reached midnight and footsteps once again moved across the highway unseen.